Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, I want us to discuss chapter 7, and by the end of this lecture, you will have a framework to think about labor market economy, understand how firms determine price to sell their goods and services in labor market, and then understand how workers formulate their expectation of wages, and then furthermore, understand wage setting relation and price setting relation, understand how the equilibrium in the labor market is determined and how we determine the natural rate of unemployment, which in turn determine the natural level of output. So labor market, which is a medium run aspect, in here we're going to discuss labor market, which later we're going to cooperate it with the financial market and goods market as we go forward to as we discuss more about macroeconomics. So for starters, think about what happened when a firm responds to an increase in demand by stepping up production. So one, higher production requires an increase in employment. So for you to produce more, you need to hire more people. Higher employment then lead to lower unemployment. So more people are employed, it means the unemployment will fall. Lower unemployment put pressure on wages. So if there are small number of people who are unemployed, it means then there will be a higher demand for workers, and then that will put wages up. So higher wages then increases production cost and forcing firms then to increase prices. Higher prices lead workers to asking for higher wages, and the cycle continues. So in the previous chapters, we ignored the sequence of events started above. We assume firms were able and willing to supply any level of output at a given price. So we assume that price was given. So long as our focus was on the short run, that implication was acceptable. Now we turn to what happened in the medium run. We relax the assumption and explore how the price and wage adjust over time and how this in turn affects the response of output. At the center of this is the labor market. So labor in which wages and employment are determined. So that's in labor market. In this chapter, we start with an overview of labor market and how employment and unemployment are determined. And then we derive the equilibrium in labor market and derive the central notion of the natural rate of unemployment. We then combine our earlier treatment of good market and financial market and financial market, right? We then combine our treatment of good market and financial market with our newly acquired knowledge of the labor market, right? So in South Africa, where the population is approximately 55, so the relevant population available for civil employment is able-bodied population of working age, 15 years of age or older, because those people can be employed. Specifically exclude all the full-time members of the SA Army and the inmate of the institution. The labor force is the sum of those who are either working or looking for work. The participation rate is the ratio of labor force to the non-institutionalized population, right? So people who are able and all the population, excluding the disabled and the army. So participation rate has until recent steadily increased over time, and this reflects the steady increase in participation rate of women. So the participation rate, more women now are working. So we start by defining unemployment rate, and unemployment rate is just the number of unemployed over the labor force times 100. So an interesting question is, do this out of labor force stay out all the time, or do they go back and form and forth between participation rate and non-participation rate? How long do the unemployed remain unemployed? Or to understand this, we turn to evidence of flow rather than stock, right? So the larger flow of workers. So a given unemployment rate may reflect two very different realities in the economy. It may reflect an active labor market with many separation, workers leaving or losing their job, many hires, a lot of workers entering and exiting unemployment, or it may reflect an inactive labor market, which with fewer separation, fewer hires and a stagnant unemployment pool. So we call that sclerotic labor market, right? Now we have some numbers here. So we have total population being 34.8 million, age 15 and over, we have 28. So that's the population, population which is able to work and stuff. And then we have labor force, which is 18.9, employed is 17.5, and unemployed is 1.6. Right. So from the table, we see that participation rate, which is a labor force of a non-institutionalized population, is just 18.9 over that, and you get that is 66.7. The unemployment rate is it should be 1.6 over 19.8. So this number should be a 1.6. Right. So we have this very popular diagram which show flows. So there are flows with unemployment. Flowing out of unemployment, there is 0.4 and there is 1.8. Flowing into unemployment is 0.24. It's going there. So those who are leaving unemployment pool and being employed is 0.24, and those who are living not in the labor force going back to employment. So that's right. So observation from the figures given above then is that the flow of workers in and out of employment are larger. The flows in and out of unemployment are larger as well in relation to the number of unemployed. There are also larger flows into and out of labor force, much of it directly from employment. Finding out what reality hides behind the aggregate unemployment rate requires data on movement of workers as shown in the figure above for illustration purposes. Right, so this tells us what is actually happening in the market properly, right? Okay. So the figure above then has three striking features: the size of the flow into and out of employment. The average monthly flow into employment is almost half a million, 0.24 from unemployed, plus 0.25 from non-participation in the labor force. So if you look at this table, there is 0.4 going there, and there is another one 0.25 going there. So let's make it 0.49, right? So that's what from non-participation. The average monthly from out of employment is 0.47, and you can check above them to see that, right? Put another way, over this sample period, hires by firm and separation from SEM equal respectively 0.49 over 1.9 times that, and so that's a 4.4%. So that is hires by firm and separation from firms. So separation from firm is 0.447. So that's a number flowing outward. So that's a 0.49 and that. So if you add these two numbers, you should get a 0.47, which is of employment each month. Why are these flows so large? About half of the separation, the flows from employment are quit, workers leaving their job in search of better alternative. The other half is a layoff due to changing employment levels across firms. The size of the flow into and out of unemployment in relation to the total number of unemployed. So the average monthly flows out of unemployment each month is 0.42. So we're taking that as 0. So out of unemployment. So we go back to our table and see that out of unemployment, there is that one. And so flowing out is 0.4 and then 0.18. So that's where we are getting that this number. So 0.24 plus that, and you should get that. So to non-participation in labor force. But another way, the proportion of unemployment leaving unemployed is equal to that, which is 39. Each month, put yet another way, the average duration of unemployment is about 3 months. So if you embed this number, if you take 1 over 0.39, you should get that is approximately 2.56, which is approximately 3 months. So conversely, unemployment duration is the inverse of a proportion of leaving unemployment. The size of the flow in and out of labor force, right? So that's another thing we are looking at. One might have expected this flow to be small, composed of one side, those finishing school and entering labor force and for the first time, and the other side, workers going into retirement. The fact is that many of those classified as not in the labor force are in fact willing to work and move back and forth between participation and non-participation. The flow from non-participation in the labor force to employment is larger than the flows from unemployment to employment. This is because those classified as not employed in the labor force are in fact very much likely like the unemployed. They are in effect discouraged workers, and although they are not actually looking for a job, they are willing to take one if they find it. So movement in unemployment. So turning to movement in unemployment over time, we expect unemployment to increase during recession and during crisis. Okay, so how do fluctuation in the aggregate unemployment rate affect individuals workers? The answer to this important question is in two ways, right? I.e., it determines the effect of movement in unemployment on the welfare of workers and the effect of unemployment on wages, right? So what are the consequences of being unemployed? How bad is it, right? So firms decrease the employment in response to a decrease in demand. So whenever there is a recession, there will be a cut or job losses. For example, now we have COVID-19. A lot of companies like Uber, Airbnb, Luvufasha, so many companies, or even many small restaurants are shutting down, which means there will be no business. So a lot of companies which rely on a lot of the economy being active, then they're going to have a lot of layoff. So if the adjustment takes place through decrease in hires, the effect is to decrease the chance that an unemployed worker will find a job. So when there is when there is a crisis, of course, it's become very hard for people to get jobs. Even those with jobs then as well will become, the probability of them losing their job as well increases. So fewer hires means fewer jobs opening, higher unemployment mean more jobs applicants, right? Fewer opening and more applicant combine to make it harder for unemployed to find jobs. If adjustment takes place through higher layoff, then the employed workers are at a higher risk of losing their job. In general, when firms use both marginal adjustment, the result is likely to be both a higher chance of losing a job if employed and a lower chance of finding a job if unemployed. So empirical evidence shows that there is a nearly exact relation between the average level of unemployment rate and the average length of time called duration. A person is unemployed. The higher the unemployment rate, the higher the average duration of unemployment. Right. Okay, so now we're going to move on how wages are determined, right? So turning to wage determination, so we have, of course, wage determination actually is a function of the way the wage is determined is a function of expected prices, the levels of unemployment, and catch-all variables. Where catch-all variables actually tell us what are the other factors which influence the wage we demand from our employer. So wages are set in many ways. Sometimes they are set by collective bargaining, that is bargain between firms and union. The higher the skill needed to do the job, the more the typical is individual bargaining power is. Two sets of facts stand out. Workers are often paid in wages that exceed their reservation wage. Of course, companies want to incentivize their workers to work hard, so they pay them above their reservation wage. And reservation wage is nothing else, but it's just a wage above a wage which will make a worker indifferent from, make them indifferent between working and becoming unemployed. In other words, most workers are paid a higher enough wage that they prefer to be employed rather than unemployed. Wages and wage increase often depend on labor market conditions. So the lower the unemployment rate, the higher the wage we can bargain for. We focus on two lines of explanation. First is that in the absence of the collective bargaining, workers have some bargaining power, which they can and do use to obtain wages above their reservation. Second is that firms themselves may, for a number of reasons, want to pay wages higher than the reservation wage. So as I said, you need to incentivize your workers to increase production. So bargaining power. So bargaining power for a worker depends on two factors. First is how easy it will be to replace the worker. And second is how easy it will be for him to find another job, right? The harder it is for him for a firm to replace him, or the easiest for him to find a new job, then the stronger he will have a bargaining power. So bargaining power then depends on the nature of the job and the labor market condition. When unemployment rate is lower, it is more difficult for firms to find acceptable replacement, and it is easy for workers to find other jobs. Conversely, when unemployment rate is higher, finding good replacement is easy for firms, but it's harder for workers to find another job. So firms themselves may want to pay more than reservation wage. Efficient wages theory suggests that wages depend on the nature of the job and on the labor market condition, right? So wages and unemployment, so wage setting relation. As I said earlier, that wage is actually a function of expected prices, unemployment rate, and the catch-all variables. Wages is a function, so if your expected prices goes up, we actually negotiate for higher wages. If unemployment rate is very low, we negotiate for higher wages. If unemployment rate is very high, our wages then drop, right? But you need to keep in mind that workers actually care more about real wage and not nominal wage. Why? Because we want to know the purchasing power of the wage we receive and not the mere nominal value of the wage we receive. Thus, then it's important. Okay, so here again, I speak about the fact that if you increase according to this function, if you increase your expected prices, your nominal wage will go up. And if unemployment goes up, your nominal wage as well will go down. If catch-all variables goes up, for example, if for example, unemployment benefit increases, it means that we actually now have to be paid higher wages for us to work. Other factors, so that's where Z is a catch-all variable. It could be unemployment insurance benefit or minimum wage laws, right? So we move then, so we now know how the workers determine the wage, or what are the drivers of the wage setting. Now we're going to look on the price setting side, where this side is the firm. So price dependent cost. So it's, of course, cost depend on the nature of production function, where we have Y is equal to AN, where A is just productivity and N is employment. So for simplicity purposes, we assume that A is equal to 1, which then mean that Y is just become equal to N, i.e. output is equal to employment. The production function Y equal to N imply that the cost of production of producing one more unit of output is the cost of employing one more worker at wage W. So from microeconomics, you remember that price is equal to marginal cost if you are you're operating as a perfect competitive firm. Unfortunately, that's not true in labor market. Actually, the assumption is not always it's not always simple. Now remember, perfect competition was just one extreme. So we set P equal to MC equal to your wage. But many markets are not perfect competitive, and firms charge a price higher than the marginal cost, i.e. they add a markup on so the wage is a function of a markup. The price is a function of wage and a markup. So a simple way of capturing this fact is to assume that the firm set price as follows. So if you check, I think the suppression here, so I will put it in a new slide. So where M is a markup of the price over cost. So PC is when M is equal to 0, if the firm is not perfect competitive, then firms have a market power. The price will be higher than the cost and M will be positive. So the natural rate of unemployment at equilibrium in labor market. So if we are talking about natural rate of unemployment, is where wage setting is equal to price setting. We equate them to get that our real wage is equal to 1 over 1 plus a markup. Price setting decision determine the real wage paid by firm. So an increase in the markup lead to firm to increase prices given wages, given for a given wages. Equivalently, it lead to a decrease in wages. So if you increase the markup, your real wage will actually fall. The equilibrium and employment rate depend on both catch-all variable and unemployment, right? So we have a graph here. You setting PS is equal to that, so that is equal to that. And then we have the unemployment rate here, right? Now, if you increase unemployment benefit, which is a Z, an increase in unemployment benefit can be represented as an increase in Z. Increase in unemployment benefit make the prospect of unemployment less painful. That's to increase the wage, so it will shift your wage setting up, and your unemployment rate will increase, right? Similarly, a less stringent enforcement of existing antitrust legislation, so to extend that this allows firms to collude more easily and increase their market power, it leads to an increase in the markup. The increase in the markup then imply a decrease in real wage paid by firms, so it shifts the price setting relation down, so if this is shifting down, it means that your unemployment then is increasing as well, right? So keep that in mind and remember this. From unemployment to employment. So associated with a natural rate of unemployment is a natural rate of employment. The level of employment that prevails when unemployment is equal to natural rate, so in the medium run, i.e. employment when current unemployment is equal to natural employment. So let U denote unemployment, N denote employment, and L denote the labor force. So you have that U is equal to U over N, but you know that U is It's just the labor force minus employment over that. So you can simplify that to write like this. Recall that L is equal to N plus U, i.e. labor force is your employee plus that. So U is equal to this. Right. So if the natural rate of unemployment is UN and the labor force is equal to L, then the natural level of employment is given by this. Right? So this should be straight up easy. So from employment to output. So recall that Y is equal to YN. We can then derive the natural level of output as Yn is equal to N, which is equal to that. Using the above equation in the relation among unemployment rate, the employment and output, we have derived the natural level of output. We can rewrite the equation as that now. So price setting relation then become that way you're talking about optimal. So this should have been Y over L, not Y. This should be Yn over L, Z equal to that, right? I will correct this before I upload. The natural rate, the natural level of output Yn is such that at the associated rate of unemployment, UN is equal to that. The real wage chosen in wage setting is equal to the real wage implied by price setting, right? So that's just showing you what happened, right? So in summary, the real wage chosen in wage setting is a decreasing function of the unemployment rate. The real wage implied by the price setting is constant, right? So we know that. The equilibrium in the labor market requires that the real wage chosen in the wage setting be equal to the real wage implied by the price setting. This equilibrium unemployment rate is known as the natural rate of unemployment. So the natural rate of unemployment, so associated with the natural rate of unemployment is the natural level of employment, and that's level of output, as I showed it above. If our primary goal was to understand the determination of output, why did we spend so much time looking at goods and financial market? What about the earlier conclusion that the level of output was determined by such factors as monetary policy and fiscal policy and consumer confidence and so on? All factors that do not enter equation 5 and thus do not affect the natural level of output. The key to answer is simple yet important. So you need to understand why then this one doesn't have C plus I plus G and whatever, right? So you need to understand what. So in the medium run, this is important. In the short run, what we discussed was important as well, right? And we're going to combine all of them to be able to discuss. We derive the natural rate of unemployment associated with the level of unemployment and output under two assumptions. We assume equilibrium in the labor market where P equal to PE. There is no reason for the second assumption to be true in short run. So that was the reason why those things don't interrupt. The price level may turn out to be different from what we expected by wage setters when nominal wages were set. So no reason for that as well to be the case in the short run, or for that to be the case in the short run. The factors that determine the movement and output are factors we focus on in the preceding chapter: monetary policy and fiscal policy and so forth. In the medium run, output tend to return to the natural level and the factors that determine output are factors we are focused on these chapters. In the medium run, all gap close, market go back to full potential. Remember, it will be important going forward, right? Okay, so as usual, I put an example for us to try to answer what are the main important things. So suppose that the firm markup of a cost is 5%, and the wage setting equation is given by that, where U is unemployment. What is the real wage and as determined by the price setting relation? Solve the natural rate of unemployment. So I did solve this and I put a solution here. So go through and try to understand it. And if you're stuck, send me an email. And if you find errors or typos, please be kind to let me know as well. So I put the solution, and there is a homework as well here. And the homework, I did put the solution as well for you to try to follow through. So do take time to solve this and make sure that you understand it. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a good evening, and you will keep learning as we continue. So